Bone drum, for the spirit, for he and she whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. The silence orbiting my skull, the fire dreaming my larynx of future sky, love singing in my bones. This rose of muscle, blossoming bones, these flowers of fire blossoming my lungs, these lungs blossoming to sky on fire, this skull of fire blossoming the wind, this sky of lungs blossoming my throat with sound, this fire in the lungs blossoming sky, the drum of bones vibrating the womb, vibrating the shadow sleeping in skull, whispering universe in the wind, this heart of drums whispering the lungs to dream, this heart of lungs singing the skull to sleep, this gravity of lungs drumming the earth, drumming the skull, this breast of lungs foaming the skull, this lung of ashes singing the wind, these hands of fire singing my lungs, this sea of skulls harmonizing infinity, this skull of lungs vibrating my heart, these pregnant lungs pregnant with sky, lungs perfuming the wind with blossoms of air, the sky of lungs singing the wind, this skull vibrating with drums of sky, these lungs drumming the wind, this window of lungs singing my skull, drumming my heart to sleep, this abyss of lungs foaming my skull, this sky of lungs blossoming my brain to sleep, this sky of lungs singing my skull to sleep, this whispering of lungs vibrating the universe, these lungs of wind blossoming the sky, this skull of sea swimming my larynx, the thunder in my ears vibrating my heart with sky, these feet of roots, these lungs of sound, the wind in my lungs drumming, blossoming sky, this abyss of shadows and ash, this hand of blossoms flaming my chest with sky, this window of lungs sleeping the sky, this infinity of wind naming my lungs sky, this envelope of lungs sealing sky. Remember sky, I drink the whisper of my lungs, this voice of lungs whispering thunder, lungs listening to lungs we sleep, this lung of flames, blossoming infinity in my skull of sky, this shadow of skull lighting the abyss with abyss, the distance listens, the silence of lungs blossoming a universe in the larynx, the silence focusing my lungs to voice, this window of lungs blossoming sky, this mask of machetes, ashes to nightmare, this voice of lungs singing the window of sky, the mirror of masks, ashing to echo, to wind, this voice of wind blossoming the lungs, this sky of lungs singing the wind, these hands of roots singing my lungs to gravity of sky, this belly of blossoms pregnant with sky, this belly of lungs blossoming sky pregnant with stars, this sky of lungs singing the wind, these roots of lungs singing the wind to gravity, to foam, this sky in my lungs blossoming the wind, these bones swimming in my lungs, drumming my heart to sound of sky, this sky of bones drumming my skull, the sky sings my throat to sun, the sky drums my bones with the wind, these breasts of sun foaming the sky, these breasts of sun singing my skull, this breast of song foaming the universe, the window of lungs blossoming wind in my skull, this voice of wind blossoming my skull, the silence of my skull sleeping in shadows, shadowing the sky with skull, this throat of voices singing the wind, this voice of lungs singing my skull, this drum of death, death drum, drumming my skull, the sky drumming the bones, this heart of sun singing, this sky of lungs vibrating my skull with sound, this womb of lungs singing the wind, this womb of lungs singing my skull, this breast of sun singing my bones, the sky blossoming in my bones of beauty, the clouds in my lungs singing sky, this fruit of lungs singing the wind, blossoming sky, this sky of lungs blossoming my skull, this sky of skulls foaming my lungs to see, this sky of bones drumming my skull, these lungs whispering thunder, this tongue of fire foaming my skull, this throat of lungs, thundering the sky, this sky of lungs singing the wind, this sky of lungs sleeping my bones to sea, this sky of lungs singing my skull, drumming my heart, bones of memory, these words blossoming universe, these lungs blossoming words, these words blossoming lungs, the roots of rivers singing my lungs, these lungs of songs, songs of lungs singing the rivers, this song of rivers blooming my skull, these roots of infinity singing the voice, this voice of lungs blossoming my skull to see, this belly of stories singing my skull, listening to the thunder in my lungs, this harmony of lungs singing the roots to infinity, this skull song vibrating my lungs to sky, this fire in my larynx singing the storm, these songs of bones blossoming my skull with sound, these songs blossoming my skull, the sky of lungs singing my bones, these lungs navigating songs, these lungs blossoming sky with sound of sky infinity, sky pearls of clouds astral milk, this blossoming of lungs singing, the sky with wind, this drum of bones vibrating my heart to sky, this skull of drums vibrating songs to this umbilical universe, this heart of drums forming sky, this belly of stories singing my skull, this harmony of lungs forming the universe, this larynx of lightning blossoming song, these roots of infinity forming my skull, the whispers of lungs forming the thunder, this birth of spirit bringing sweet tears to my eyes, thunder orbiting the lungs, whispering infinity to sleep, the imagination of lungs orbiting the wind, this wind blossoming the ears, blossoming lungs, the sky blossoming sky, the silence orbiting my skull, the spine of songs singing my lungs to sleep, the windows whispering sky, this heart vibrating my ears with sky, a throat of heart singing sky, a cloud of lungs blossoming air, the sun in my bones, vultures vanishing in the veins, this skull of sun singing the wind, this map of lungs singing fire in the stars, this shadow of skull sleeping, this breast of lungs singing the wind, these lungs sailing infinity, blossoming wind, these petals of lungs blossoming universe, these petals of wind blossoming infinity, this lung of roses blossoming sound from the womb, this voice of lungs singing the wind, this voice of lungs blossoming the wind, this sky of bones drumming my skull, this lung of sky drumming my bones, these lungs pregnant with sky, these lungs pregnant with sky, the wind pregnant with lungs singing sky, singing a sky of skulls, a sky of skulls drumming the bones, drumming the heart, a heart of drums singing sky, this breast of fire foaming my skull, this heart of lungs drumming my bones, vibrating my skull with sky, this tongue of lungs vibrating my skull, this heart of drums singing my bones, this larynx of lungs singing sky, these petals of sun singing my lungs, these petals of lungs blossoming to breast, a breast of sun singing these lungs of fire, dressing the wind, this storm of lungs singing my skull, this whisper of lungs foaming breasts with sound, this voice of lungs singing the heart with wind, these lungs mapping the wind, navigating infinity, this drum of bones beating my skull with sun, this drum of hearts vibrating my lungs, this window of lungs singing the wind, this womb of wind blossoming my lungs, the seed of infinity singing, the fruit of my skull to dream, this breast of lungs blossoming sleeping suns, the shadows sleeping in my skull, my throat imagining lungs sleeping in sky, my ears listening to this womb of wind, this voice of roots flowering infinity, the lightning in my jaw singing the sun to sleep, singing the lungs to sleep, this womb of windows whispering the wind, our lungs swimming the sky, the abyss in my eyes, the infinity in my eyes, blossoming the womb, these skeletons of ash singing my throat, this lung of infinity swimming my skull, this lightning in my skull, dreaming sky, this womb of bones drumming my heart with sky, this tongue of sky singing my lungs to sleep, to fire, my skull listening to lungs swim, my tongue whispering the fire, the voice of lungs whispering fire, God the Mother, I am your astral womb of fire. The cave of my mind sings the future of prisms, of kaleidoscopic love. It is going to be spectacular, my son of love. This nest of nerves singing my skull, this air of voices singing my skull, this skull of sun swimming sky, the sky of lungs swimming infinity, this tongue of fire swimming the wind, this skull of sky swimming the lungs, the air translating my lungs to wind, this womb of lungs blossoming the wind, this throat of sky singing my lungs, this lung of sky singing my throat, this sky of lungs blossoming the wind flowering lungs, the sky of lungs singing my spine, this seed blossoming roots, this seed blossoming lungs, these roots blossoming lungs, these roots blossoming lungs of sky, singing my spine to the wind serpent biting my lungs to see, this cloud of lungs blossoming the wind, the sun in my lungs blossoming sky, these lungs of sky singing infinity, the drum of lungs vibrating the wind, my skull singing sky serpents to see, the skull of sun birth, the wind singing my lungs, this wind singing my lungs to sky, this wind in my lungs, blossoming sky, this thunder in my lungs whispering the sky, these lungs whispering fire to skull, this heart of drums vibrating the sea, this sky of lungs whispering fire to skull, singing sky, singing lung, this sky of lungs whispering thunder, blossoming the fire on my skull, this sky of lungs vibrating my heart with sound, this sky of lungs drumming my bones to see, the sky of lungs singing my skull, this belly of sun singing the wind, the skull of sea swimming my bones of beauty, these stars in my lungs igniting my skull to dream, this tongue of flames whispering thunder in my skull, drumming my bones, vibrating my heart with sky, this window of lungs breathing sky, the sky swimming my skull swimming sky, this voice of thunder, voice of lungs singing the wind, this voice of lungs singing the windows to sleep, this window of skulls singing the yellow jaw of the moon, this heart of lungs drumming the bones of beauty, this breast of sun whispering fire, this sky of bones drumming my heart, these lungs pregnant with sky, this heart of fire foaming my skull, this skull of storms singing the wind, this flower of flames foaming my face, this voice of lungs singing my spine to see, this skull of fire petals, the sky blossoming in my lungs, this sky of lungs impregnating my bones with the wind, this wind of lungs pregnant with sky, this fire in my skull dreaming the wind, this tongue of fire pregnant with sky, this tongue of fire foaming my skull with dreams, this distance of sky swimming my skull, singing my skull, this river of lungs forming my skull with song, this sky of pregnant lungs harvesting the wind, this breast of sun breathing my bones, this heart of drums vibrating the air, vibrating the sky with sun, this tongue of fire whispering the skull to dream, the silence harmonizing my skull to dream, this fire in my skull harmonizing my tongue of fire whispering the wind, my tongue of drums vibrating my lungs, the sky of skulls blossoming the wind, the voice of lungs singing the wind, this throat of sky singing the lungs, this distance of lungs singing the lungs, this distance of dreams singing the lungs, this fire in my skull dreaming the light, this shadow in my skull singing the sky, the shadow sleeping in my skull, this bone of drums vibrating the universe, this heart of drums vibrating the universe, this whisper of lungs singing fire to the sky, this bird of fire navigating the sky of my lungs, this bird of fire swimming the universe, this womb of fire foaming my lungs, this womb of lungs singing the sea, the serpents in my lungs biting their tails, these shadows in my lungs singing sky, this voice of lungs seeding the universe with sky, this throat of lightning, this lightning in my skull vibrating the wind of sky, this lung of suns, these petals of lungs blossoming my ears to dream, my ears navigating the wind, navigating navigating the compass of dreams, these stars navigating my skull, the map of infinity burning, the sky of lungs navigating the windows of the womb, navigating the windows of my skull. Whispering, whispering, whispering thunder to my lungs and fire to my hands, this distant of lungs swimming the universe, this door of infinity singing the wind, this earth of lungs singing the wind to dream, the sky swimming my lungs, navigating the windows of my skull, this silence in my skull blossoming the lungs, this flower of silence blossoming my lungs blossoming this skull of silence, orbiting silence, this drum of bones blossoming my heart with sound, vibrating my lungs to universe, this sky of lungs whispering fire to the skull, this tongue of fire whispering the wind, the earth mother singing our lungs to sky, the gravity of lungs singing the universe, the sky of lungs singing the wind, this skull of lungs singing the sun, this skull of sun singing my spine to sleep, the sky of lungs singing the wind, this breast of fire, this bird of flames floating, floating, this bird of lungs pregnant with sky, this fruit of sky blossoming in my skull, singing my lungs, vibrating my heart with the drums of infinity, drumming sky with this drum of bones, this voice of lungs navigating my skull, these lungs blossoming sky, this spine of sea, singing my skull to sleep, the sky, this sky of lungs, singing the wind, this sky of lungs, forming my skull, this sky of lungs singing the wind, this sky of wind singing my bones to sea, the drum of my heart singing the fire of lungs, the sky singing, the sea floating to my skull of sky drumming the sea, the bones of my bones drumming the heart to sleep, the sky of lungs drumming my bones, vibrating my skull with sea, the sky of lungs drumming sea, the sky of lungs drumming my bones, this heart of fire flying to sea, these birds of fire foaming my skull with wind, this sky of lungs singing the wind, these birds of flame foaming my skull with the sound of lungs drumming the sky of my bones, this fire whispering, this fire foaming the sky of my lungs of abyss singing the wind to light, vibrating the lungs, singing, drumming, the fire whispers its petals of flame, the skull orbits to dream, the serpents in the lungs biting their tails to dream, the serpents singing the roots, these roots on fire to skull, the skull of my roots blossoming the wind, my skull of sky singing the wind, vibrating my heart with the sound of infinity, this heart of lungs vibrating the bones to sun, this breast of sun singing the wind, this breast of sun singing my hands to sleep, singing my skull to dream, the dream vibrates, the skull foams sky, the eye orbits infinity, the lungs dive abyss, the skull sees infinity, this heart of vibrations drumming the lungs, this lung of drums singing the wind to sky, to foam, the skull of foaming singing the sea, these hands of fire flowering the universe with sea, these hands of fire orbiting my skull, singing the sound of infinity, these hands nourishing lungs with air, these hands nourishing my dream with sun, seeding my skull with hearts, the sky of skulls drumming my bones, orbiting the vibrations of my heart, this heart of infinity seeding the fruits of the new Jerusalem, this lung of roots, this lung of serpents singing the wind, singing the sea of my skull, orbiting the sound of the universe, this river of lungs flowing to my skull, this river of serpents biting their tails to dream, this dream of drums vibrating the universe, orbiting the skulls, lungs orbiting, hearts vibrating the drum of my skull, this petal of fire blossoming to prayer, blossoming from the abyss of my tongue, this petal of fire dreaming the wind, these lungs of sky blossoming the wind, this distance of lungs, this distance of windows, the silence of shadows singing my skull, this whisper of lungs singing fire, these petals of lungs whispering fire to the universe, whispering lungs to the air, whispering the windows of lungs to sky, this river of lungs flowing to my skull, the rivers of the sky, flowing to universe, this birth of lungs forming the universe with spirit, forming my skull with sound, the sky of lungs weeping the rain of rivers, these rivers flowing to my skull, singing the sky of infinity, this mosquito of sky drinking the lungs, this belly of lungs singing sky, this belly of lungs forming the wind, blossoming the skull, this direction of distance of all directions home, forming the lungs, this distance of lungs singing the sky, this river flowing to the skull, to the universe, this key orbiting my lung, the satellite sailing in the skin, this lightning in the lungs, crystallizing the kaleidoscope of larynx, these roots of lungs blossoming the larynx, this fruit of mouth, this fruit of voice singing the skull, this pregnancy of lungs singing the wind, this sky of wind drumming the skull, this skull of dreams singing the lungs to sky, this sky of lungs singing the wind, this lung of rivers flowing to my skull, this sky of wind singing my lungs to skull, this computer of lungs singing voices of the universe, this heart of lungs vibrating my bones to sky, drumming my skull to sea, this sky mapping my lungs mapping the rivers of my skull, this sky of lungs vibrating my ears, this heart of sun singing sea, this breast of sun singing the wind, this sky of lungs vibrating the universe, drumming the bones to sea, these lungs vibrating my skull to dream, this space of lungs singing the wind, these lungs blossoming sky, this earth pregnant with lungs, this sky of lungs pregnant with earth, this fetus of sun singing the wind, these lungs pregnant with sky, this sky of lungs singing my skull to sleep, this lightning in my skull singing the thunder in the throat, this throat of thunder vibrating the chest, this breast of lungs singing the wind, these lungs launch the sky, these bones drumming my skull, this voice of lungs singing the universe, this voice of lungs launch the sky, these petals of lungs blossoming the skull, this pearl of fire blossoming the skull, this petal of flame whispering my skull to sleep, the sky of lungs launching infinity, the sky of lungs launching infinity, the mouth of voices launching infinity, this bird of flame petals, my lungs with wind, these petals pregnant with sky, this womb of windows singing the wind, this tongue of fire petals the sky, this sky of lungs singing, this petal of fire singing my skull to sleep, this tongue of flame singing the wind, this sky of lungs whispering tongues of flame, these tongues of flame whispering my skull to sleep, this wind of words forming my skull, this sea of skulls singing the wind, singing the petals of the lungs pregnant with sky, a tongue of fire licking the sky, this river of lungs singing the wind, these birds of fire singing the wind, these birds of fire singing the lungs, this throat of sky singing the wind, this sky of wings singing the lungs, this bird of flames singing my tongue to see, this bird of flames drinking my skull to dream, this throat of sky singing the wind, blossoming the lungs on branches of bone, drumming, orbiting infinity's embryonic air, orbiting the silence of my skull, this prayer of lungs singing to stars, this prayer of lungs listening to the orbit of dry skulls, singing the echoes of bones, my heart of lungs drumming the skull to sleep, this prayer listening to lungs, this prayer of lungs listening to the windows of the womb, orbiting infinity's door of sky, the sky of lungs singing the windows of wombs, the sky of lungs praying to skulls, the hurricane of lungs sleeping, the skull, my skull, the silence of lungs singing the wind, blossoming the orbit of dreams, the sky of lungs singing the wind, the sky of lungs whispering skulls, maps to sleep, this lung listening to stars, this womb of prayer orbiting the silence of my skull, this map of lungs singing the universe, this voice of skulls singing the universe, these flowers of wind praying my skull to sleep, this petal of fire whispering nothing fast, flaming my skull to ash, the sky of bones drumming my skull to sleep, the lungs of these rivers, foaming the skull to sleep. This moon, this yellow jar of milk, singing the wind in my lungs, vibrating my skull to see. My heart vibrates the drums of bones, to sound, to skull. This prayer of lungs listening to the wind, these bones drumming my bones to see. This sky of questions vibrating my lungs, my heart of sun singing, drumming the bones to see, to sleep, to sleep. The sky of lungs singing the wind, orbiting silence. This skull of lungs sleeping the wind. The sky of lungs singing the wind. These hummingbirds flowering the lungs with sound, with the nectar of infinity, with the nectar of sky singing to skulls. The sky of skulls singing the wind of my lungs, the fruit of my skull singing the sky. The skull of silence singing the sky of skulls, singing the wind, the fruit of my skull singing the universe, the sky of lungs singing the wind, the sky of voices harmonizing the lungs, harmonizing the fire of infinity, this harmony of air orbiting the skull. The snakes are biting their tails, the snakes are biting their tails to dream, drinking the venom to visions of fire. The satellite of skulls sailing silence, satellites sailing in the skin. These seeds in the wind singing my skull. The sky of wind foaming the wind to sound. Satellites sailing in the skin. The satellite of skulls sailing the lungs singing, orbiting my skull with listening prayers. My skull of dream and silence. This computer of lungs singing the wind. The sky of lungs singing. These eyes of sun singing the wind, this prayer listening to the womb of lungs, this river of lungs singing the wind, the light of the visitor singing my lungs, the shadows sleeping my skull, the shadows sleeping in my skull singing to infinity, to these ears orbiting sound, to this tongue of flame that petals the wind with silence, bone drum dancing my lungs.